Part 1, The Judgment. 12-year-old Devin Jackson stood in chains before the massive alien courtroom, his small human frame looking tiny against the towering blue creatures that surrounded him. The Draknari judges were huge, each one at least 15 feet tall with scales that glittered like broken glass under the strange purple lights. Their yellow eyes stared down at him with what looked like disgust. Devin's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Just 3 days ago, he'd been exploring the beautiful crystal temple on this alien world with the other human visitors. Now these creatures were saying he was a thief, that he'd stolen their most sacred treasures. "The human child is guilty," declared the largest judge, his voice like rocks grinding together. When he spoke, Devin could see rows of sharp teeth. "He has violated our most holy temple and taken what belongs to the ancestors." Devin wanted to scream that it wasn't true. He'd only touched one of the glowing crystals because it was so beautiful. He hadn't taken anything. But every time he tried to speak, the metal collar around his neck tightened and made it hard to breathe. Ambassador Tasha Williams, the only other human in the room, stepped forward. Her dark skin was pale with worry, and her hands were shaking. "Your honors, please listen. Devin is just a child. He doesn't understand your customs. Surely there's been a mistake." The head judge's eyes flashed with anger. "Silence, human. Your species has caused enough trouble already." The boy touched the sacred stones of memory. The penalty for this crime has remained the same for 1,000 years. Devin felt his knees go weak. Penalty? What kind of penalty? "Death by dragon fire," the judge continued, and Devin's world seemed to spin around him. "The boy will be thrown into the pit of judgment. If the great ones choose to spare him, he may live. If not..." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter, but sounded more like metal scraping against stone. "No," Ambassador Williams shouted. "He's an innocent child from Earth. You can't." But 2 massive guards were already moving toward Devin, their claws wrapped around his arms, lifting him off the ground like he weighed nothing. The boy tried to struggle, but it was useless. These creatures were incredibly strong. They carried him across the courtroom to a dark hole in the floor. Devin looked down and felt sick. It was deep, so deep he couldn't see the bottom. Strange sounds echoed up from the darkness. Growling sounds. The sounds of very large, very dangerous things moving around down there. "The dragons have been our executioners for centuries," one of the guards hissed in Devin's ear. "They have never failed to deliver justice." Devin looked back desperately at Ambassador Williams. She was crying now, trying to push past the other aliens to reach him. "I'm sorry," she mouthed to him. "I'm so sorry." Then the guards released their grip, and Devin was falling. The drop seemed to last forever. The walls of the pit rushed past him in the dim light. He hit the sandy ground hard, all the air rushing out of his lungs. For a moment, everything was dark and quiet. Then he heard them, heavy footsteps in the sand. The sound of massive bodies moving. A low rumbling that seemed to come from deep inside something very large. Devin's eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, and what he saw made his blood freeze. 3 enormous shapes were emerging from caves in the pit walls. Dragons. Real dragons, just like in the old Earth stories, but bigger than anything he'd ever imagined. The smallest one was still the size of a school bus. Their scales gleamed in the faint light filtering down from above, and their eyes glowed like fire. But it was the biggest one that made Devin's heart stop completely. This dragon was ancient. Devin could tell just by looking at it. Its golden scales were covered in old scars, and its eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. This creature had lived for a very long time and seen many things. The dragon moved closer, its massive head lowering until it was just a few feet from Devin. The boy could feel the heat from its breath and smell something like cinnamon and smoke. He closed his eyes and waited for the fire that would end his life. But instead of flames, something unexpected happened. A voice spoke inside his head, not out loud, but directly into his thoughts. Interesting. The voice said, ancient and tired, but somehow gentle. "You are not what I expected, young human." Devin's eyes snapped open. The dragon was staring at him with what almost looked like curiosity rather than hunger. Part 2, The Bond. Devin stared up at the massive dragon in complete shock. The creature's golden eyes seemed to look right through him, like it could see into his very soul. The other two dragons, one red and one black, stayed back in the shadows, waiting. You can talk?" Devin whispered, his voice barely audible in the huge pit. The ancient dragon's head tilted slightly, and Devin heard that voice in his mind again. "I can do much more than talk, young one. I can see the truth that burns inside you, and you are innocent of the crimes they speak of." Devin felt tears starting to run down his cheeks. Someone finally believed him. "I didn't steal anything. I just touched one of those crystals because it was so beautiful. It started glowing when I touched it, but I didn't take it." "I know," the dragon said gently. "My name is Theron, and I have lived for over 3,000 years. In all that time, I have learned to read the hearts of those who stand before me. Your heart carries no darkness, no greed, only fear, sadness, and a pure spirit that reminds me of better times." Devin wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "If you know I'm innocent, why don't you tell them? Why don't you help me?" Theron's massive form seemed to sag with an ancient sadness. "Because I cannot, child. None of us can." The dragon turned his great head, and Devin saw something that made his stomach drop. Around Theron's neck was a thick metal collar covered in the same type of crystals that had been in the temple. The collar pulsed with a dull red light. "We are slaves," Theron continued, his mental voice heavy with centuries of pain. "These collars control our minds, cloud our thoughts, make us forget who we once were. The Draknari have kept us as prisoners and executioners for over 300 years. Devin stared at the collar in horror. "That's terrible. How can they do that to you?" "Because they are strong, and we were caught off guard long ago when we trusted them," Theron said. "But tell me, young Devin Jackson, yes, I know your name from your thoughts. What happened when you touched those crystals in their temple?" Devin thought back to that day. It was strange. The moment I put my hand on it, the crystals started glowing brighter and brighter. Then alarms started going off everywhere, and the priests came running. They were screaming about thieves and violations. Theron's eyes suddenly blazed with something that might have been hope. "Did you feel anything when you touched it? Any strange sensations?" "Well, yeah, actually, it felt warm, and I heard this weird humming sound in my head, like music, but not music. And for just a second, I thought I heard voices, lots of voices calling out from far away. The ancient dragon's entire body seemed to tremble with excitement. Voices calling out, 'Yes, that makes perfect sense. Child, do you realize what you may have done?' Devin shook his head, confused. Those crystals you touched were not decorations or religious symbols. They were control devices, master keys that regulate the collars worn by dragons across the galaxy. When you touched them with your bare hands, your human energy disrupted their signals. For just a moment, you gave dozens of my brothers and sisters their first taste of freedom in centuries." Devin's mouth fell open. "Really? But how is that possible?" "Humans have a natural electromagnetic field that the Draknari never accounted for when they built these systems. Your people's technology is different from theirs, more intuitive, more organic. When you made contact with those crystals, you accidentally created a feedback loop that temporarily overrode their programming. As the days passed in the pit, something amazing began to happen. Devin, being the kind of person he was, couldn't stand to see the dragon suffering. He noticed that Theron had several deep cuts on his scales that looked infected and painful. "Those wounds look bad," Devin said, pointing to a particularly nasty gash on the dragon's foreleg. "Don't they take care of you?" Theron's laugh was bitter. "We are tools to them, nothing more. Tools are maintained only enough to remain functional." Without thinking, Devin tore strips from his shirt and used water from a small spring in the pit to clean the dragon's wounds. Theron was amazed by the boy's gentle touch and genuine care. "Why do you help me?" the dragon asked. "I am supposed to be your executioner." Devin looked up at the magnificent creature as he carefully cleaned another wound. "Because it's the right thing to do. And because you're not really my executioner. You're a prisoner just like me." As Devin continued to tend to Theron's injuries over the following days, something unexpected began to happen. The dragon's memories, suppressed for so long by the collar's influence, started to return in small pieces. He began to remember a time when dragons flew free among the stars, protecting travelers and keeping peace between different worlds. "We were guardians once," Theron told Devon one evening as they sat together in the dim light. "Not killers or slaves, but protectors of the innocent. Your kindness reminds me of what we used to fight for." Devon smiled, still gently cleaning the dragon's wounds. "Maybe someday you can be guardians again." "Perhaps, young one, perhaps." Part 3. The Truth Revealed. On the fourth day in the dragon pit, something incredible happened. As Devon continued caring for Theron's wounds, the ancient dragon's memories became clearer and stronger. It was like watching someone wake up from a very long, confusing dream. "I remember more each day," Theron told Devon as the boy carefully applied clean water to a healing cut. "And what I'm remembering makes me very angry." Devon looked up from his work. "What do you mean?" Theron's golden eyes blazed with newfound clarity. "The priest who accused you, Kethmos, I remember him now. He has been visiting this pit for months, always in secret, always at night." "Why would he come here?" Devon asked, genuinely puzzled. "To steal our collar crystals," Theron said, his mental voice filled with rage. "He has been removing small pieces from our control devices and selling them to other species across the galaxy, building his own empire of enslaved creatures." Devon felt his stomach turn cold. "You mean he's been making slaves out of other creatures too?" "Yes. Dragons, yes. But also the giant stone walkers of Kepler Prime, the sky whales of the Vega system, even the metal singers of the asteroid belts. All controlled by crystals stolen from our collars, all sold by that corrupt priest for massive profits." Devon's hand stopped moving as the full picture became clear. "So when I accidentally activated those temple crystals, you freed dozens of creatures across multiple worlds," Theron finished. For the first time in decades, enslaved beings felt their minds clear. Kethmos knew immediately that his secret operation was in danger of being exposed. Devon sat back on his heels, his mind racing. "So he blamed me for stealing the crystals to cover up his own crimes." "Exactly. He needed a scapegoat, someone to take the blame and die quickly before anyone could investigate further. A human child from a less advanced world was perfect. Who would question the word of a high priest against a young alien?" Devon felt anger building in his chest, not just for himself, but for all the innocent creatures that had been enslaved and tortured. "This is horrible. How many beings has he hurt?" "Thousands," Theron said sadly. "Maybe tens of thousands. And it gets worse, young friend. Show me that device you carry." Devon pulled out his small tablet, a simple Earth-made computer that he used for games and reading. The Draknari guards had let him keep it because they thought it was just a toy. Theron studied the device carefully. "Your human technology is fascinating. So different from what the Draknari use. They build everything around control and dominance. But human tech seems to focus on cooperation and problem solving." "I guess," Devon said. "I never really thought about it. This is just a basic tablet. Nothing special." "Nothing special?" Theron's mental laugh was warm. "Child, this device operates on quantum frequencies that are completely incompatible with Draknari control systems. In fact, I believe your tablet might be able to disrupt our collar signals entirely." Devon's eyes went wide. "Really? But how?" "The same way you disrupted those temple crystals. Human electromagnetic signatures are naturally chaotic compared to other species. What the Draknari see as primitive technology might actually be our key to freedom." Over the next several hours, Theron shared more recovered memories with Devon. The boy learned about the dragon's proud history as peacekeepers, about the day they were betrayed and enslaved, and about the vast network of control collars that now stretched across dozens of worlds. "The worst part," Theron explained, "is that we remember just enough to know what we've lost, but not enough to fight back effectively. The collars keep us confused, angry, and focused only on obeying orders." Devon studied his tablet thoughtfully. "What if we could figure out the exact frequency that controls your collar? Maybe I could create some kind of interference pattern." "That's incredibly dangerous," Theron warned. "If you get the frequency wrong, the feedback could kill me instantly. And even if it works on my collar, we'd still be trapped in this pit with no way to help the others. Devin nodded seriously. I understand the risks. But Theron, how many more innocent people will suffer if we don't try? How many more creatures will be enslaved while Kethmos build his empire? The dragon was quiet for a long moment. You have the heart of a true guardian, young Devin. Very well, but we must be extremely careful. Using his tablet's basic frequency analyzer, Devin began studying the patterns of light pulsing through Theron's collar. The work was slow and delicate. One wrong calculation could be fatal. But as the hours passed, Devin started to see patterns in the chaos. I think I'm getting it, he whispered excitedly. Look, the pulses aren't random at all. They're like a code, repeating every few minutes. Theron watched in amazement as a young human worked with technology the dragon barely understood. Your species truly is remarkable. We dragons have great physical power, but you humans have something far more valuable, the ability to see solutions where others see only problems. As Devin continued his analysis, both he and Theron began to realize the true scope of what they were attempting. If they could break the collar's control, it wouldn't just free one dragon. The quantum entanglement connecting all the collar crystals meant that disrupting one could potentially free them all. Are you ready for this? Devin asked, his finger hovering over his tablet's activation button. Theron's ancient eyes met the boy's determined gaze. For freedom? For the chance to be guardians again instead of slaves? Yes, young hero. I am ready. Neither of them knew that their actions in the next few moments would change the fate of the entire galaxy. Part 4, The Liberation. Devin's hands were shaking as he held his tablet near Theron's collar. After hours of careful analysis, he'd figure out the frequency pattern that controlled the ancient dragon's mind. But knowing the theory and actually doing it were two very different things. Remember, Theron said gently, sensing the boy's nervousness, if this goes wrong, it's not your fault. I've been a slave for 300 years. Even death as a free being would be better than another day in chains. Devin took a deep breath and looked up at his massive friend. It's not going to go wrong. I won't let it. The boy positioned his tablet carefully against the collar's main crystal. The device felt warm in his hands, almost like it was alive. Devin had programmed it to send out a reverse frequency, essentially the opposite control signal that kept Theron enslaved. Here we go, Devin whispered and pressed the activation button. At first, nothing happened. The collar continued its steady red pulsing, and Theron remained unchanged. Devin's heart sank. Had he calculated wrong? Was his simple Earth technology too primitive after all? Then the collar began to vibrate. The red light started flickering faster and faster, like a strobe light having a seizure. Theron's massive body tensed as waves of pain shot through him. The other two dragons in the pit, Pyrian and Ember, moved closer, sensing something was happening to their elder. Devin. Theron's mental voice was strained with agony. Something's wrong. The collar is fighting back. Devin could see sparks flying from the metal band around the dragon's neck. His tablet was getting so hot it was burning his hands, but he held on tight. Just hold on. I think it's working. The collar's pulsing reached a crescendo, the light becoming so bright it hurt to look at. Then, with a sound like thunder, both the collar and Devin's tablet exploded in a brilliant flash of white light. Devin was thrown backward, landing hard in the sand. His ears were ringing and spots danced in front of his eyes. For a terrifying moment, he couldn't see Theron at all through the smoke and debris. Then he heard it, a sound that made his heart soar. It was laughter, deep, joyful, magnificent laughter that seemed to shake the very walls of the pit. I remember. Theron's voice boomed, no longer just in Devin's mind, but echoing out loud through the cavern. I remember everything. My name, my purpose, my brothers and sisters across the stars. As the smoke cleared, Devin saw Theron rising to his full height for the first time. The dragon's golden scales seemed to glow with inner fire, and his eyes blazed with intelligence and freedom that had been locked away for centuries. But something even more incredible was happening. The explosion hadn't just destroyed Theron's collar. It had created a chain reaction. Devin watched in amazement as Pyrian and Ember's collars began sparking and smoking too. What's happening? Devin asked, scrambling to his feet. The collars are all connected through quantum entanglement, Theron explained, his voice now clear and powerful. When you freed me, you sent a liberation signal across the entire network. Every dragon in the galaxy is feeling their mind clear for the first time in centuries. Above them, alarms began wailing throughout the Draknari complex. Devon could hear running footsteps and panic shouting through their telepathic link. Theron was receiving messages from dragons on dozens of worlds, all of them free, all of them angry, and all of them ready for revenge. "Sir," a guard's voice echoed down from above. "The dragons are rebelling. Reports coming in from across the Empire. They're breaking their chains." Devon heard the corrupt priest Kethmos screaming orders. "Impossible. Seal the pit. Kill them both before this spreads further." But it was already too late. Theron stretched his magnificent wings for the first time in 3 centuries and let out a roar that shook dust from the ceiling. Pyrian and Ember, their own minds now crystal clear, joined their voices to his. The sound was so powerful that cracks appeared in the pit walls. "Stand back, young liberator," Theron said to Devon. "It's time to leave this prison." The ancient dragon's claws, no longer dulled by mental confusion, easily tore through the reinforced barriers that held him captive. Chunks of metal and stone fell like rain as Theron carved their way to freedom. Devon found himself gently lifted in the dragon's massive claws as they burst through the surface into the alien night sky. Below them, the Draknari stronghold was in complete chaos. Guards were running in all directions, and Devon could see other dragon pits throughout the complex erupting as their prisoners broke free. "This is incredible." Devon shouted over the wind as they soared higher. "We actually did it." "We did it," Theron corrected, his mental voice filled with gratitude. "Your courage, your kindness, your human ingenuity. These things saved not just me, but thousands of enslaved beings across the galaxy." As they flew through the starlit sky, Devon could see the lights of spaceships in the distance. Reports were flooding in from across the Draknari Empire. On every world where dragons had been enslaved, the great creatures were rising up and reclaiming their freedom. But Theron wasn't focused on revenge. As they approached the main Draknari city, the dragon's thoughts were surprisingly gentle. "Remember what you taught me in that pit, young friend," Theron said. "Kindness is stronger than cruelty. Justice is better than revenge. We will end the system of slavery, but we will do it the right way." Devon smiled, feeling prouder than he ever had in his life. "The human way." "The guardian way," Theron corrected, which, I'm beginning to think, might be the same thing. Part 5, The New Alliance. The Dragon Liberation War lasted exactly 72 hours. Across the galaxy, newly freed dragons moved with purpose and precision, but not with the mindless destruction their former captors expected. Instead, they followed the example set by Theron and Devon. They fought for justice, not revenge. Devon watched in amazement from Theron's back as they soared through space toward the Draknari homeworld. Hundreds of dragons flew alongside them, their massive forms creating a sight that no being in the galaxy had seen for over 3 centuries. But what impressed Devon most was their discipline. Despite centuries of abuse and slavery, the dragons were not seeking to destroy their former masters. They were seeking to free others. "Look there," Theron said, directing Devon's attention to a massive space station orbiting a distant planet, the Kepler mining facility. They've been using enslaved stone walkers to mine rare crystals for 50 years. Devon could see the dragons carefully disabling the station's weapons while avoiding damage to the living quarters. Within minutes, massive rock-like creatures were floating free in space, their own control collars shattered. The stone walkers' joyful songs, sounding like mountains singing, echoed through space itself. "They're all working together," Devon observed with wonder. The dragons, the stone walkers, even those flying creatures from the outer rim. "Freedom has a way of bringing people together," Theron replied. "Your species taught me that." Back on the Draknari homeworld, complete panic had taken hold. Ambassador Tasha Williams, who had been under house arrest since Devon's trial, found herself suddenly freed as Draknari guards abandoned their posts to deal with the crisis. She rushed to the communication center and managed to send an emergency message to Earth. "This is Ambassador Williams reporting from the Draknari capital. Devin Jackson is alive and, well, you're not going to believe this, but he's leading a galactic revolution alongside an army of dragons. On Earth, Devin's parents Malik and Keisha Jackson watched the news broadcast in stunned disbelief. Their 12-year-old son, who just days ago had been sentenced to death, was now flying through space on the back of an ancient dragon, negotiating the surrender of an intergalactic empire. The end came faster than anyone expected. When Theron and Devin's fleet reached the Draknari homeworld, they found a planet in chaos. The corrupt priest Kethmos had barricaded himself in the central temple, surrounded by his few remaining loyal guards. "Please." Kethmos begged as Devin and Theron landed in the temple courtyard. "I was only following orders. The slavery system was already in place when I arrived." Devin slid down from Theron's back and walked calmly toward the cowering priest. Despite everything this being put him through, the boy felt no hatred, only sadness for all the suffering that had been caused. "You try to have me killed to cover up your crimes," Devin said simply. "You enslave thousands of innocent creatures for profit. But you know what? I'm not going to ask Theron to hurt you." Kethmos looked confused. "You're not?" "No," Devin continued, "because that's not who we are. That's not who humans are. And it's not who dragons are supposed to be either. You'll stand trial for your crimes. And if you're found guilty, you'll face justice. But it will be real justice, not revenge." Theron lowered his massive head until he was eye level with the corrupt priest. "The boy speaks wisdom, Kethmos. We could burn you to ash right now, and many would say you deserve it, but we choose a better path." The formal surrender ceremony took place 3 days later. Devin found himself standing before the same tribunal that had condemned him to death. But this time the roles were completely reversed. The Draknari judges, their empire in ruins and their slaves freed, had no choice but to accept the terms dictated by a 12-year-old human boy and his dragon companion. "The age of slavery is over," Devin announced to the assembled representatives from dozens of worlds. "All enslaved creatures will be freed immediately. All control devices will be destroyed. And a new alliance will be formed to make sure this never happens again." Judge Vextar, the same being who had sentenced Devin to death, now bowed his massive head in submission. "What do you require of us, young human?" Devin looked up at Theron, then back at the assembled crowd. "Cooperation, peace, the chance for all species to work together as equals." 5 years later, Ambassador Devin Jackson stood on the bridge of the Starship Unity's Dream, the flagship of the Galactic Peacekeeping Alliance. At 19, he was the youngest ambassador in galactic history, but also one of the most respected. Beside him, Theron served as the Alliance's military commander, leading a fleet that included ships from over 50 different species. A report from the Outer Rim called Lieutenant Zara Thompson from her communication station. "The trade dispute between the crystal miners and the gas harvesters has been resolved peacefully." Devin smiled, remembering the scared 12-year-old who had been thrown into a dragon pit not so long ago. That boy could never have imagined that his simple act of kindness, caring for an injured dragon, would reshape the entire galaxy. "What's our next destination?" Devin asked. "The Vega system," Theron replied. "Some kind of territorial dispute between the Sky Whales and the Metal Singers. Nothing we can't handle." As their ship jumped to hyperspace, Devin reflected on how much had changed. The boy who had been sentenced to death for a crime he didn't commit was now helping to keep peace across hundreds of worlds. And it all started with one simple truth, that kindness and courage could overcome even the darkest evil. "You know," Devin said to Theron as they watched the stars streak past, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you had just eaten me that first day like you were supposed to." Theron's mental laughter was warm and full of joy. "Then the galaxy would still be a much darker place, my friend. Sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change everything." Devin nodded, thinking about all the creatures across the galaxy who were now free to live their lives in peace. "I guess humans and dragons make a pretty good team." "The best," Theron agreed. "Guardians of the innocent, protectors of the weak, and proof that friendship can overcome any obstacle." As their ship headed toward their next mission, Devin felt a deep satisfaction. The age of slavery was over. The age of cooperation had begun, and it all started with a human boy who chose kindness over fear.